Ready? Okay. Calling the September 10th Planning Commission meeting to order. Freya, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hennessy.
Here.
Mr. Iwa.
Here.
Mr. Patton. Mr. Conley.
Here.
Mr. Donovan.
Here.
Ms. Scarsall.
I'm here.
Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Okay. Approval of the minutes, Planning Commission meeting of August 6th. Are there any changes that haven't been passed along already? Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I abstained because I wasn't here, so.
And one abstention, that's. Public comment, since there is literally no public, I think for the first time since I've been on this commission, ever.
Scared them all away.
Everyone away.
Do we need to? Right. Yeah, they're meeting with one of the people doing a design for the potential addition to this building. Okay. Old business, zoning text amendment AZ 025-00004, use regulations. John, you want to talk to us about this?
Our first item under old business is AZO 25-00004, use regulations. At our last Planning Commission meeting, this item was tabled for additional sort of conversation regarding accessory structures, and particularly those accessory structures regarding sports courts. This was sent back to the Planning Commission from Town Council a month ago, and so Planning Commission at its last meeting had some debate, some uncomfortability of moving forward, and so today what's before you is slightly modified language, and I know that there has been some dialogue regarding the proposed language, and so if there are recommendations, I'll just share what is listed here today. Right now, and it's private tennis, padel, pickleball, or other sports courts shall not be constructed within 20 feet of an adjoining property. What was also added is all sports courts must be adequately screened on all sides facing rear side lot lines using landscaping to buffer from adjacent properties. Additionally, we did have a community member who shared at our last meeting padel courts in their standard sizing. So the addition of 13 feet 6 inches and the walls was increased from what's in the current code to 12 feet. And so those were the only changes that are listed for your consideration today. I'll entertain any questions that you guys might have.
Larry, I think you were back and forth with Gina on this a little bit.
Yeah, when I was looking at it and we started, what stimulated my thinking was our discussion about which sports, trying to identify the sports, trying to come up with a specific word that would, it was activity oriented instead of environment, or looking at the environment. I personally, and it's the same approach we are taking with the pervious surfaces, where we started off with the pervious surfaces, giving specific methods and to use and products to use. And we came back and said, wait a minute, what we want to do is what we want to accomplish is to manage the runoff. So we backed off and decided to approach it from the what are we trying to achieve, as opposed to making legislating it so that they would have to use. We were identified certain things that they would have to use. And I looked at it the same way, is that the things that we want to do environmentally is that for the community, we want to maintain. We don't want light nuisance, we don't want noise nuisance, and we don't want sight nuisance. And so I was thinking maybe that's the way to control this, is by having strong regulations and enforcement on those, and not try to pick out specific activities that are allowed or not allowed, and trying to understand, put time limits on it and some of those things. So I was just thinking that perhaps we're looking at it a little, we should look at it more like we did with the pervious system, surfaces.
So would sport courts kind of get there? And we have lighting requirements, there's no light at night, and we have setback requirements, and we have landscape requirements.
And noise, and we have noise.
And
we
we
have
have
a noise
noise
ordinance too.
requirements.
So that was all I was going to say, is that I think we should make sure that we're not trying to legislate what can be done, but what the result of having these things going on.
And I did talk to Gene and go through, and he's okay with that. You know, he had some concerns of, are people going to put up a hockey court or something? But I think what Larry's saying addresses that, and if we just do sports and make sure we have appropriate noise, lighting, setback, and buffer requirements, we're covered.
For example, what if I want to put a bocce court in?
Yeah, they're not noisy.
Well, have you been at an Italian wedding where bocce was being played? Pretty noisy.
Yeah. But
been on the beach.
your point of if someone wanted a bocce court, the noise, setback,
Exactly.
everything would cover that.
Correct.
So we're okay, I think, with your wording?
So if we're okay, then we just motion for approval, then if there's any other comments, yep.
One quick question. How do we define chain link fence? I mean, is there an industry standard? Not to,
Yeah,
that dawned on me a couple times as I was reading through things this.
I don't know if there is an exact definition in our 374 of chain link fence, but standardly,
Is there an industry
There's-
standard? I mean, I know what I visualize, I just didn't,
Chain Link Manufacturers Institute that.
got it. That, then we're good. That, just wondered. Thank you.
any other unreadiness?
Okay,
Motion,
So we need a motion to approve
I move.
the ordinance as amended.
I make a motion to approve the ordinance as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you, John. All right, number 2, AZ 025-000009, the beachfront overlay district. John's going to talk to us, and Mary Beth, thank you for your work on this. I'm sure you're going to weigh in on this as well.
yes, our second item under old business is our proposed beachfront overlay zoning district. As you know, or aware, at our last meeting, staff sort of introduced the framework of that overlay zoning district. And so what's before you today is how that ordinance would look as adopted within our zoning code. This would be a new section 12-81 as proposed. And I won't go through word for word of all of the standards in there, but essentially the purpose and intent highlights what we introduced last month, establishing a consistent visual and spatial ecologic transition buffer zone, and that's between the built environment and the ocean and the natural dune system. The ordinance itself creates a overlay zoning district that's consistent across the entire oceanfront or beachfront for Kiowa, and so it's being generated based upon an established existing line in the 2018 South Carolina jurisdictional baseline. And so from that particular line is how this overlay is being driven and crafted. It establishes 2 buffer zones, one being buffer zone A and buffer zone B. These two distinct buffer zones allow 2 different types of uses. And I'll walk through those in a short moment. I do want to acknowledge that as part of this process, we are required to engage with the South Carolina State and the Bureau of Coastal Management, who is responsible for the critical area in the ocean and critical areas through coordination of our state statute. And so before or after I go through the ordinance, I've shared with you in a hard copy of what a summarizing of my comments and some of the recommendations that the state has provided. Regarding the district boundaries, as stated, it would be starting at the baseline and moving towards the highlands. and that would encompass every parcel within 150 feet of that baseline. So we would be able to attach any standards for any property within 150 feet of the baseline. Authorized uses and prohibited uses. This would allow any particular use that's allowed to date by the base zoning designation of that particular subject property. The only two prohibited uses would be the prohibited uses would be seawalls, bulkheads, and other hard erosion control structures. And then what would be exempt from this particular ordinance are beach walkovers. We know that beach walkovers are already being permitted via Article 16 of our town code, in addition to what the state statute and the purview of the Bureau of Coastal Management. I'm moving forward to the buffer zones that are being established. Buffer Zone A is a 50-foot buffer zone that's established landward of the 2018 South Carolina beachfront jurisdictional baseline. And within that zone, no structures, including pools, shall be permitted. So this is the most restrictive of the two established buffer zones. This is closer to the ocean. So more appropriately, we felt in proposing this language that this should be more restrictive, allowing no structures. Moving to buffer zone B, this would allow a little bit more ability to build structures or improved areas within the zone. However, they're still limited. And so if there is a maximum height that's being attached to this particular zone of 10 feet, and that's measured from base building height elevation. And then the other notion regarding structures in this area, so this is a percentage of the actual buffer zone of the entire, of that area of that subject property. It shall not exceed 20% of improved areas. And for purposes of this ordinance, what we describe as improved areas, that's any physical alteration to the site. So that would involve whether or not it's pervious or impervious. So if someone wanted to do paving or hardscapes or any structures, boardwalks, those types of things, it would be limited to not exceed 20% of that particular area of that zone. The two other things that I will note is that applicable standards, we connected this particular ordinance back to our existing tree preservation and landscaping standards. Those were crafted not too long ago, and still feel comfortable that those were crafted in the right manner to protect the dunes. Those were considered specific languages to address the dunes and vegetation. And then more importantly, regarding additional protections, we've connected the ability to any improvement that we would coordinate additionally with our town's Environmental and Natural Resources Department. Additional considerations regarding lighting, those point back to our existing code, our town municipal code and our Beach Management Act, Article 16. And then I think there has been a lot of just conversations regarding nonconformities. And I think you guys should be warranted to have that conversation today as you consider recommendation on this ordinance that existing structures that have been illegally already established, they would be able to build back and they'll be essentially deemed non-conforming. And so any new structures that would be subject, undeveloped properties is what would be subject to the new code. As there might be situations where relief is necessary or warranted, there is a provision that where there is hardship, that the applicant or property owner could request a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so that was just added as relief specifically in there to make sure that it was aware that that ability is granted to the property owner if there are unique circumstances.
But John, just so I understand, is that, so you're saying that existing properties that, let's worst possible case, let's say there's a fire, they'd be allowed to rebuild as they were prior to, okay? So they're, and what about improvements? Is that, if it's more than, if they're putting more than 50% of the value of the, isn't that what we use as our standard, 50%?
Correct.
Okay, if they're going to do an improvement that's more than 50% of the value of the home, they still can do that
They
regardless?
would need to meet the new standard of this ordinance. So
Oh,
if
they'll have to, that would have to meet the new standard of this ordinance?
Correct.
But not if they were replacing it?
Correct.
Okay,
I thought that language came out. thought I saw the 50%
I mean,
in the
that's
prior.
just how any project works.
Okay, so you
I
don't need
mean,
to.
I don't think it has to be stated here. That's just
That's
how a
what-
project, and it's 50% of the structure. So you back the land out.
That's for redevelopment. For redevelopment, if you're gonna do redevelopment, if you're over 50% of your property, then it's gotta meet the new requirements. Not, so we're still saying that with this
Right.
spread.
Yeah, so all this ordinance is pointing back to our existing non-conforming section, which the 50% is, as you described, is what is in place.
And then if there's a non-conforming property that wants to simply do an improvement, does that trigger the, that it shall not exceed 20% of the buffer zone? So if there's a non-conforming property that wants to do something else,
Correct.
they have to meet.
They would need to
They are
meet this.
restricted within the 20%.
They would, but I'm not really sure I know what you mean by improvement. Like, they want to expand?
Yeah, if they want to, I mean, you gave examples of putting hardscape down, or they want to put a patio down.
Yeah,
or, you know,
then they
whatever
would
it is.
have to,
put it in
but that would hold true to any change that has happened anywhere on the island that you would have to.
Okay.
You'd have to abide by the new,
There's, yeah, ordinance.
whatever changes have happened over time.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is just show you maybe in your materials, you saw just a couple of snapshots of this overlay zoning tool that we've created. And so the pink zone is that buffer zone A, which is more restrictive. The yellow zone would be the more relief or permissible zone to do activity. And so that 20% would apply to everything in the yellow. So only 20% of that yellow area you would be able to improve.
Yeah, and we did that so that they wouldn't be able to do a massive, like a complete deck along, like you see where that pool is, you wouldn't be able to put hardscape across the whole front of the property line.
And it's interesting in terms of what we'd have non-conforming now. I mean, if this were to go into place, I mean, I did a little bit of counting and I did not go all along the beachfront. But if you look along Eugenia, and it's a little bit hard to tell without standing there exactly what is part of the structure and what isn't. You're looking at less than 20 homes. Did you come up with a different number, John? And then if you look at that 50-foot increment that's seaward, you basically have part of the Cape and the Sandcastle pool that go across.
Yeah, I think that is generally.
I'm dropping stuff today. That
The,
kind of
the
day.
one thing as I complete just sort of describing the actual ordinance, I wanted to walk through, as you said, I engaged with the representatives from the state. And so they did provide their recommendations and specific language changes to the ordinance. Some of it staff agrees, I think, are generally agreeable, and some of those other, I think, staff doesn't necessarily support. But even in my conversation, I think the state said that, for lack of better words, they would feel comfortable with their language, but I think it would still be okay based on what we've had. So the first is looking at the particular sections, the effect and applicability of the overlay zoning district. The state is requesting that we add language that essentially asserts their permitting authority in that, as part of that section, doesn't change our ability to inform or administer our ordinance. It just kind of outlines what their purview is, and so staff supports that addition. The second is,
John, so what that means is that we could approve it, and the state may not be, doesn't have to approve it?
correct,
Okay.
yeah.
What
So,
they're saying is that we've got final say.
yeah, so what I want to be very clear in ensuring jurisdiction, so the state's jurisdiction would be the critical area, so where they've established. So if we look at where our jurisdiction starts, would be the baseline towards the highlands, even though the area in between the setback line and the baseline, the state has purview in that area. So we have sort of an overlap, for lack of better words, and only thing that, for what I'm recommending, is that this section just state clearly that the state also has purview for portions
But
of
the
the beach.
point that Larry's making is where there is an overlap, whatever the town agrees to prevails? Or is it the other way around? If there's a,
I
They
think
would,
it's the
they
other way
would,
around.
they would,
Around, I think.
well, that's what I thought, but
They would need to meet both statutes, or both regulations, both the
So the more
states and,
restrictive?
So the more restrictive would naturally
Prevail.
rise, yes.
By way of an example, like, I represent the city of Isle of Palms, and you've probably seen it in the newspaper, we're fighting over the fellow that built the seawall. So that's in the critical area, which is clearly within what used to be OCRM, now DES's jurisdiction. But the city also has an ordinance that was approved by the state that says you can't build anything in the critical area that's incompatible with state law. So there's like 2 pending lawsuits. There's one up in Columbia at the Administrative Law Court involving DES and OCRM, and then we have an action in state court. So both parties can seek to enforce, or both, like the state and the town can both seek to enforce their regulations. The reason we had to run this by them is to make sure that they're good with it and approve it and that they're consistent.
So bottom line is that in order to do what is proposed, both the city and the VMS have got to be approved.
Correct.
Yes. Any other, on that first one? On the second one, the state is recommending that how we've defined or established our zones, and this is one that I kind of pushed back in conversation with them. They've recommended that instead of using the baseline, we use the setback line. It's not a significant, what I would say, difference, because for Kiowa, majority of the difference between the baseline and the setback line is 20 feet. But for purposes, I think the intent of our ordinance, I would prefer that we retain the ability to be able to enforce from the baseline back to the highlands. And that being, when you look at the distance between the two through the entire beachfront, although majority of it may be 20 feet, I'm going to scan all the way down to the east end of the beach where you'll see that gap begins to differ. Just for illustrative purposes here. On beachfront, right? So you can see here, the distance between the baseline and the setback line grows. And so that's more than 20 feet in this area. And so based on the state's application, the enforcement of that would begin up here going towards a highland, opposed to down here going towards the highlands. If that's communicated, if you guys are understanding or following.
Yeah,
my work.
we had talked about that, and we wanted to use the, that we wanted to use the baseline because it was a consistent line. Even if they change it in X years, we're going to keep with the 2018 line, and we felt,
The other thing is with the setback line isn't a consistent offset of the baseline. It's based on the erosion rate, so that gap, like I said, it could be, on average, most times you'll see it's about 20 feet, but it could be 25, 30 feet or more sometimes. And so that's the reason we're trying to have it as a consistent measure.
John, just out of curiosity, what are those cross-hatched areas that extend out? What do that represent?
That represents the actual overlay. And so every property that touches that within 150 feet of the baseline just has this crosshatch across it. So this property just extends beyond this property's boundaries, opposed to most on Kiowa, which stops at the primary dune. This extends all the way to the mean high water line.
Somebody owns that property?
Yeah.
Yes.
All the way to
It's,
the
yeah, they do.
doesn't Kika own some of that in?
Not these. So this is the area of Royal Beach.
It's
Yeah.
Royal Beach, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are a handful of places along.
Yeah, they were.
So, this may be a frivolous question, but, so I understand, if you touch 150 feet, if your parcel touches 150 feet, you're in the overlay district. Does that mean that the property that goes inland from 150 feet is also deemed overlay?
It would be under the overlay, but there are no standards that would be warranted for that, because the only standards that are in place are in that first 100 feet.
Yeah, because I was getting confused like by the hatch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some significant depth in a person's lot that goes
So for
inland from 150 feet, and I mean, they might
So-
challenge that.
So for example, this lot here, that's the end of, I think this is Flyway or Surf Song. They're not close enough to that 150-foot mark, I mean, to the actual zones of where the area that we're trying to
Right.
restrict. They wouldn't be impacted. And so down the road, let's just say if Beach eroded and now that baseline is moving further north, instead of coming back into Min to capture that property, this overlay would already be in place, and the only thing that we're doing now is adjusting the zones. If there are no, I'll go to the other two comments from the state. They've recommended adding to section D, which is the authorized and prohibited uses. Right now, it's highlighted that beach walkovers are exempt from this ordinance, but beach walkers, when I mean exempt, they are still governed by our town's Article 16. State is just requesting that we add in this language that sort of reminds folks that they still need approval from the state for beach walkovers. So it's a little bit reiterative because we already kind of know that, but I have no issues with that being. And then the final is regarding G, dune protection. This is just sort of a reformatting, adding in the state as their review and authorization, in addition to our town local authorization to review and approve in connection with our environmental department. And so it's really just adding in that the state has review and authorization as well. We will share this tool. I think we shared this tool with you guys already. If not, we'll share this tool if you guys want to continue to play around with the interactive tool. But that kind of, Madam Chair, concludes my introduction of this ordinance. We haven't received any public comments or anything regarding this ordinance,
Beth, do you want to?
or formally.
I was gonna say, I think John did an awesome job of summarizing it. I think the one place that I still have a few concerns are around how we protect the maritime forest if somebody goes into that 20% of that 50-foot area. And I think we just need to add a bit of wording there relative to maritime forest protection, and we're working on that, but we'll have that for next month.
And would that be covered by the tree preservation ordinance and subsequently the design review board would be able to?
It would, but most of that deals with trees, like the trees we see out here, as opposed to maritime forest. I mean, we've touched it, but I don't think we've dealt with that sort of geography specifically, which is a little bit different than the rest of the island. You know, we're not talking about a grand oak with a certain trunk size. We're talking about the scrubby maritime forest. So
Stuff in front of dunes.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
so I just think we need to make sure that we've thought that through in our language in the beach overlay.
Because
So I think it,
I would
because I
like to
don't
see that also
I-
covered in the DRB.
Well, I think it would be great, but right now I didn't, from my read of the tree policy, I don't think we've addressed that sufficiently.
So my recommendation there, if it's something that you want to go to town council as part of this, then we would need to fold that into the recommendation today. Or I don't want to table this necessarily, but we can table and create that necessary language to add in, unless if there's any unreadiness to not move this forward.
I'd like to move it forward. We can have, can we do in our, if people agree that they don't want to table it, if we put some wording in that we're approving this and it's going to be subject to an additional line about maritime forest or something. Mac? can we-
Maritime forest preservation, can we?
You could add that language in, or you could just approve it as is and recommend to town council that they address that issue, however you want to do it.
Can we add it in before it goes to town council if we move it to town council with that condition? Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But I would sort of frame it as we've approved it with the understanding that we would craft language to address that specific need that you're, and as long as we get the body to agree to that.
Can you restate the actual, like how you frame it?
I don't know yet. Therein lies the challenge.
What are you trying to get at?
Well, the way that we protect trees now, I mean, if you had a project, they'd come out and they'd look at the number of trees, size of the lot, that sort of thing. And the ones that would be somewhat sacred would be your grand oaks. Well, that's not what we have along the coastline, the maritime forest. So I think we've got to craft that a bit differently. And I've had a little trouble figuring out how to do that, but I think we've made some headway on who to talk with and how to get some language there.
Now I see your point about the DRB, but I guess is the question, does that belong here? Or does that belong as an amendment to the tree standards or in some other form?
That's a good point. I mean, we could address that in the tree preservation ordinance itself as sort of another focus area.
I'm asking the question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I don't know that there's a specific perfect place for it. The reason I'd like to address it here is that one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this beach overlay is to protect the maritime forest. So I want to make sure, or I would prefer that we make sure that that doesn't somehow slip through the cracks. Or I would like that, if we've said that that's one of our big concerns, I would like to address it here.
One of the things that I would encourage, let's think about putting it in a tree, because we have a mechanism for review and we've got a board set up to do it.
Super.
Whereas if we set it up here, there's really no mechanism other than the regulation to do it.
So how do we do that though in tandem? Because if our stated purpose here, if one of them is to protect maritime forest, and we don't simultaneously do that with the tree preservation, if we don't amend that in some way or add to it in some way, there's a rub.
Then I would ask just a few more questions then. One being the areas, not areas, but the types of vegetation that we're looking to preserve. Maybe I'm just thinking out loud here, you attach it to the zone districts, if there's something in the specific zones, or is it that entire area that you wanting to? Reason being because based on the comment that you just made about if structures, the balance of new structures or anything going into the buffer zone B, that would allow some removal of vegetation. Based on the larynx today would only be essentially 20% that would be.
Right, but then what we've said that, and I don't disagree with you, but I think the place that where I see that we might have missed something is that in that 20%, we require folks to go back in and replant native species, which I think makes sense. But I think two things. While you could remove 20%, completing construction could mean that you remove more than 20% to actually complete the construction, correct? I mean, that's what we've had with dunes and growth along places on the beachfront at this point. So I guess we're not just looking for native species, we're looking for maritime forest. You can't really replace that. So somehow we have to be sensitive to that before it's removed.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't want the 20.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the enforcement would be plan review, when they submit for zoning permit and plan review, that's where the enforcement would.
And maybe the 20% is, you can remove up to 20%, not cover 20% and have an extra 10% for construction. I don't mind having it in the ordinance, and then, because we want to get something to protect, so we can put it in here. And then, because one of the things we're going to look at is folding the tree preservation into the DRB, which makes sense. So then we can look at the enforcement. By putting it in the regulation, it then will allow the DRB to say, this is our rule, and we're going, to give them some teeth to enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, that was my initial thinking on maybe it going to the landscaping ordinance, putting that type of language. I totally agree. I think visibility here is important, don't get me wrong, but I think the application of it being connected to vegetation and tree preservation naturally fits in that landscaping section. So that was my only point, maybe just pointing this ordinance to the tree as we have done, and we can beef up however necessary in the other ordinance.
I think I understand you saying that, and I think I agree with you that we need to point to it and mention specifically what we're pointing to when we point to the DRB. Is that what you're saying?
Right now, we're pointing back to the tree preservation and landscaping standards as written. And what I'm saying is if we would.
If you look at H,
Yeah.
here it says tree protection and landscaping standards
But I
shall
don't,
apply, and then I think what John's suggesting is we go back to 12-129, those tree protection and landscaping standards, and add specific provisions that apply to the beach overlay district and maritime forest and address it in there. Since we're already pointing to that in subsection H. Is that what you were saying?
Correct, yeah.
And so we can put more specifics for maritime forest type vegetation as opposed to just,
In that way, if there's anything else that we need to touch up regarding tree and landscaping as a whole, we can do it as a collective instead of a piecemeal sort of approach.
okay, got it. I'm good with that.
are there any other comments on this? So we need to move the resolution first, and then we can talk about the amendment. So first, can we have a motion to to approve the 12-81 beach overlay zone?
Second.
Okay, so in discussion now, based on John's recommendations, which I agree with, shall we amend the regulation to include the
1, 3, and 4.
1, 3, thank you. Include the blueprint 1, 3, and 4 as recommended by the state to add those in? Does that make sense? Somebody want to move that as an amendment to the regulation?
I make a motion to move the staff recommended changes to the resolution.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So we now have an amended resolution in front of us. Is there any more discussion on this beach overlay zoning district? So we need to vote to move this to town council. We have a motion and a second. So to approve the amended, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, okay. Do we need to say something, move it to town council with the understanding that the tree board will eventually become the VRB?
We'll
I don't
address,
think we need to
we
do
can
that
address
now.
that.
Kind of hanging out there, huh?
We could do it with, that there will be an addition to 12-129 that will add specific requirements for the beach overlay district. Is that what we're talking about?
All right, I thought there was two different points there. I thought Mr. Iwan shared that regarding I think, which is the next thing on our, not next, but later on our agenda, that you were inquiring about the combination of a tree board and the design review board being proposed. Not necessarily the recommendations that Ms. Marshall was alluding to. Am I confusing the two?
Yeah, so as I understand it, we're using the DRB would be the enforcement arm of the overlay zone.
It doesn't.
I know. Well, that's what I'm asking. How do you,
So I would, to your point, I would make the modify the motion, just incorporate the concerns that Ms. Marshall had,
Okay.
saying that we'll come back to modify the landscape and tree
12-1.
preservation.
just let them know that we're expecting something else to happen, and that, that we want
That
something
can,
else to happen.
that can be a separate motion too, I mean.
We can
yeah.
make an,
Isn't the tree preservation board the enforcement arm?
is.
And
It
that
would
does
be.
exist.
Yeah.
so what we can do is add another amendment on H1 to say that 12-129 will be amended to include more specific requirements for the beach overlay zone. Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, we would be bringing that back before you all, so I would, yes, I think
So-
that's,
Yeah, I don't think you need to take any formal action.
yeah.
We don't need to
Just
make that amendment? Okay.
I just request that John and them do it, and then at the next meeting or
Right.
time, he can come back with the
Okay.
revised standards.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the amended resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much, Mary
Did
Beth.
we just approve the motion or the?
We did the amendments, then
First,
we
okay,
approved
okay.
the amended
Got it,
motion.
I got lost.
Thank you to John and Mary Beth for all their,
Daniel.
and Daniel. Thank you for all your work on that. Okay, next, in old business, AZ025-000010, architectural review controls. John?
Yes, Town of Kiowa Island proposed architectural review controls. So this proposed ordinance does two things. One, it establishes a design review board for the Town of Kiowa, and two, establishes architectural design standards section that would sort of give the scope of review for the design review board itself. This is being requested, just a little background to reiterate from our last meeting. The status of the current architectural review board and its history of engagement was formed, a joint task force was formed between the community association and the town to anticipate the transition of the existing architectural review board to the property owners, to the community. And so without knowing the fate of that particular transition, the town is moving forward with establishing its own architectural review, rightfully so, based on our ability under state law to do so. And so what's being proposed is a design review board. For today's sort of discussion and recommendation, there are a few things that I want to just highlight, and then I think we can open it up for more dialogue, because I do anticipate some conversation here. One, under proposed section 12-24.2 Design Review Board. This does create the board itself, and what it does is follows our existing sort of framework based on state statute of composition and appointment terms, the meeting structures, administrative office, and the rules and procedures, what will be essentially established by the board itself in a separate document. It also prepares or proposes its functions and powers, and then provides some guidance to the approval and review procedures for the board. The second component, as mentioned, 12-130, that's being proposed, architectural standards. These particular standards just give the applicability and exemptions. So this right now, as being proposed, is focusing on all real property within the municipal limits. So any property within the town's jurisdiction would be subject to this design review board. And specifically, what's being carved out, or at least focused on, is everything except single-family residential developments. And so primarily it would be commercial, multifamily is what this design review board would be reviewing in their capacity.
Plus Eugenia, plus the one not subject.
Plus any purview of any properties that are not subject to, correct, thank you. Not any properties are not subject to an existing established architectural review board. So those properties on Eugenia would be subject to this design review board. Additionally, what is connected to the architectural standards are design principles and guidelines. And you'll see that in a separate document. This would be a next step to really formalize this in a more crafted way that would give the members of the design review board guidance in how they're reviewing. And so thank you to Rob and Sandy, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Vine for working through and trying to get some big picture items. So right now those focus on site orientation and layout, massing and scale, building and structure heights, fenestration, and environmental stewardship and process. And so each of those bucketed items establishes a few principles along with a few guidelines. And so the success of an architecture review board, just from an application standpoint, is really the ability to be subjective in some manners and flexible for design, but still utilize sound principles that achieves the mission and integrity of what the community is looking for. And so all of these are reflective in there. If you've had a chance to review them, we can discuss those as well if there's things that we need to add. The final, not final, but the next thing that I'll share in the discussion point that I think is warranted, as you know, we've considered this as a new board, but I think just as reference for resource purposes, effectiveness, improving the efficiency of review, the combination of our existing landscape tree preservation board with the design review board could be a solution to advancing development projects through the permitting and review process in a more efficient manner, saves the town some resources. And so staff would support that effort to combine those. You don't have any language today that shows what that combination looks like. That just conversation kind of materialized last week, but we could prepare with that thought that the two efforts are being combined as far as into one board, one function. So I'll pause there, Ms. Hennessy, and note, open it, I guess, for questions or follow-up.
Do you
So.
work on, Bob and Sandy, add any color or your thoughts?
Any call?
I definitely do. Do you want to go first?
No,
So, always. So just a couple of things. One, I hear the point about combining tree preservation board and the DRB. I'm not sold yet on presuming that, because does the, recognizing that the volume of requests through the tree preservation boards it seems like it's a fairly low volume, so that would speak to the benefits of combining and getting some efficiencies there. What I'm a little not completely sold on yet or unclear on is the competencies required for the design review board, which requires architects, it requires design professionals, and so I worry a little bit about diluting that with trying to do too broad a thing out of the gate. And so, my instinct would be not to try to do that out of the gate, but kind of create the design review board, attract the talent. We had a lot of discussion about that some will need to be compensated, but we also wanted local community representatives that presumably would not be compensated unless somehow there was a weird crossover. It feels like an approach might be to optimize for that and get kind of the best talent we can get for the design review board, given the very high stakes of getting it wrong. If there's a new commercial development or the types of activities that would come before the board, and then kind of let that roll for a while as the tree preservation board kind of gets rolling, and then consider potentially combining, if the volumes are such or if the skills are such, but trying to design for that out of the gate, that feels like that could come with some risks. And so I'm kind of uncertain.
But the tree board is only going to get rolling through projects that go through the DRB. I mean, it's not a very distinct, like one does one and the other does the other. I mean, and frankly, the competencies on the tree board, it's hard to even get that competency level. And I mean, being on it, I mean, I know it was a struggle to even get a quorum of people that you could count on, so to speak. But if you have all that horsepower in the DRB, that's going to make the tree part of it even that more under scrutiny.
Yeah, I would think you'd have on the DRB, whereas the tree preservation board, was residents who may or may not have skill levels. And you need 5 people, that's a lot of people for not a lot of work. Whereas if you combine them, you can say, when you say, who do you want on this DRB, you want someone with landscape architecture like Rob had been on it. You want someone with landscape architecture experience. I think for resources, I still think combining it makes sense because trees are one part of the design review board. So you need an architecture person, you need a tree person, you need, we need to get different skill levels. And if we need to hire professionals to do that job, that's something that we can discuss. Because we don't just want people like us who have opinions but no experience, no hard, we want people with hard skills, not just opinions.
I guess my only thought is, why do we have to decide that now? I mean, get the thing up and running, and attract the talent, and kind of have that process inform, the potential combination of the two.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to add is that when we were doing the tree board, setting it up, I can't remember Jen's last name. Jen Hayes. And she was very involved, and it was very beneficial. But one of the things I came away with is that she was very involved in the whole process when a project came. So if you move the tree, can you build this? So it wasn't just looking at the tree; it was looking at the entire project. And I think we should take that holistic approach here too.
That is fair, and I've seen her in action, and how those things integrate. The other, it's a thought process, right? And it's sort of, it's more around how you kind of get something off and rolling and sort of learn from it and have the flexibility to adjust, as opposed to kind of go in with a specific concept. But the other question I had, and John, we discussed this when we met, was on the principles here. Are these kind of viewed as sort of, well, let me back up. I appreciate that at this level we want to keep them reasonably objective and not, to give you the flexibility to work within them. So you don't want something that's a 200-page document. But are these viewed as preliminary and kind of framework in nature, and that there would be an expectation that once the DRB gets up and running with the professionals and so forth, that more detailed standards would start to emerge? Or is the expectation that this would be the prevailing long-term framework?
No, so this, I think, is the former of what you said. We are in a draft document of what I would say are principles and guidelines. And I think it would be important for that new board members to really understand and capture. So for me, I would want them a part of that process of really finalizing what those things should be, as they would be the ones hands on deck reviewing and administering those standards and reviews. So I would want them as part of that process. And similar to what we did with the tree board, is once their rules and procedures and how they operate, I think this is just a framework. And I think if there needs to be additional, what I would say, standards, the only hesitation I would say is I do think that sticking really at a high level as best we can would be my recommendation. The more you say that you have to have this color, this type, the more I think difficult it is to allow architects to do what they do.
But John, when I looked at that, when I read it, I saw it more as the outline, maybe the chapter headings of what's going to become our version of the Designing with Nature manual.
Yes, and to me, in crafting a document like that, that's not something that we would want to just kind of do overnight. And I think that's the purpose of this being just a framework of that.
John, has anybody estimated how many projects they think would come before this board, at least initially?
We don't have a whole lot more when we assess our
It'd be redeveloped.
but redevelopment potentially, but there's not a whole lot. I can see a lot of renovation, maybe.
Okay.
But I mean, we have East Beach, we have West Beach, Upper Beach Walker, Freshfields. I mean, that's kind of our scope.
But we're certainly expecting more renovation activity to redevelopment to take over.
This is an interesting conversation because we would anticipate, yes, some renovations, but right now we don't see a whole lot of renovation in multifamily.
Oh, that's right.
So that number would already be split to just other commercials, and most of the other commercial, what I would call, have been with the resort in their next phase of operations. Night Heron Park was already kind of underway. The Ocean Course Clubhouse, those were recently done. So I don't see like a whole lot of action, but I think it would be in place that we can capture those things on the horizon.
Any other comments? So what we can do, I guess we want to get this on the books so people know we're doing it. So well, first, let's have a motion to approve this, and then we can have more discussion. So can I have a motion to approve Regulation 12-24-2 Design Review Board?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. So further discussion, shall we move it to town council as it is?
So one thing I would want, I know this was, just came up in your discussion regarding the structure, the composition. I want to make sure you guys were satisfied with the composition and that we had some back and forth on what that looks like. So I do want to at least hear from you on your thoughts on the composition of the board and compensation, et cetera.
I mean, I definitely thought we need a compensated professional, whether it's, you and I talked about this, John, whether it's a staff person, you know, Treya has some experience in this sort of thing. We definitely need a compensated person who knows what they're doing, who has the skills and background and experience to really.
And that can be part of your recommendations. Town council still has the ultimate decision on administrative things of the town operations, but I mean, you could make that as part of your recommendation based on what you see as an existing condition.
How would it work if, I mean, perhaps I don't have the visual here, but if we have one member who's a community member, and then we have 4 members who are professionals, either somehow professionals relative to what we're doing here. I mean, would we have architects on there who also are drawing homes or not homes, but who are doing work on the island? Would there be, I mean, how do we get people who know enough and know the island well enough to contribute well, while at the same time there's not a conflict? I mean, or have we thought about that at all?
That's an interesting, I think, comment. There's 2 things that comes to mind initially. One is our process when we went through with the tree preservation board. What we actually realized is a lot of the design professionals who are locally are really only dealing in residential, and a lot of the commercial projects, the architects are not really boots on the ground, because they're hiring firms that are renowned firms a little bit more across the country.
Right.
The second thing that I think is we can determine that. So if we want for those members to have credentials or professional experience, we can dictate the rhyme and rhythm of, so it doesn't necessarily have to be 1 in 4, it can be all 5. I think the question is going to be recruitment and maintaining the appetite for them to be able to serve. I think you're going to have to open it to broader than just residents on the island. So it's going to have to pull from the region.
That's what
I
this
think you
says.
want
Yeah.
to as well.
We had that conversation.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the way I read this is you really, I mean, perhaps I'm misreading something, but that if it's a 5-member board, only one person would be necessarily a resident.
So,
I mean,
so
you could end up with
Unless
more
you
than
have,
that.
unless you
Yeah,
have that
you
overlap.
could have folks
But I think
who
that's the
check more
point
than one
that
box.
John was inviting some debate about, because we actually talked about this quite a bit. Is it 3 and 2? You know, what's the right mix here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder.
I think it's important, we want people who know Kiowa and who don't say, oh, this commercial development's been developed in my town here, I don't see any problem with you doing it there. Whereas residents might say, no, that's too dense or too whatever.
and some of that can come through the vetting process, right? Some of
Yeah, I
that
think it's gotta
comes
be-
through the vetting process.
I think there are a lot of architects and stuff on Kiowa. I don't know how many, you know.
Yeah, and then I think
But
kind of.
I'd like to start with keeping it Kiowa because they're going to understand Kiowa and understand what we want the island to be going forward.
See, and I think,
certainly-
I don't disagree with you, but I think we need a mix. I mean, I think you need people with a bigger world perspective, but you've gotta, I'm not sure how you make sure you have that balance, but I think you've gotta have that balance.
I think it is
certain-
in the recruitment, right?
Yeah, I certainly think you're going to get a very limited audience from a geographic sense, because it's going to be people from the low country, and that's even too broad. You could say it's going to be people who are within 50 miles a year kind of thing, that are in Charleston.
Greater
And they
Charleston
may
area,
be,
maybe.
you know, on James Island, or, you know, just, I mean, they're going to be locals, I mean, in a sense that they
I
understand
said,
the coastal.
And, okay, yeah, okay, so recruit, so a lot of this is recruitment, we probably don't need to address it here, I'm guessing. And then my second question, and it's a big if, so should this ARB, should the town ARB go to the next phase and at some point be the entire island, would these same people deal with residential? Would we have one DRB? Has that been flirted with at all?
To make sure I understand your question, you're asking
So
when you
if this ARB has a bigger purview than what we're talking about now?
Sort of the original concept of
All of
the task force.
Okay, so it would be up to us to still set that tone. I mean, I think you want to be able to recruit members who are competent either way, even if they're not dealing in residential right now, and they would still be able to do that.
Well, wouldn't that be a kind of an explicit expansion of charter, at which point you'd rethink the composition, right? So I think it's a point, but I don't think we have to solve for it now.
No, I don't
because
think so, but I'm
it's
just,
beyond.
I still think it colors it a little bit.
But on this point of residents, Joanne, like, I think about the current ARB, and you mentioned Jen. I don't think Jen lives here. I think she lives in Charleston, right? And Amanda, you know, so I think to your point, I think it would be hard to get the degree of professionalism that we need if we are that restrictive. I think the thing to play with is, should it be 5 and 2 versus 4 and 1? And there's no magic here. It's sort of more of, you weight more towards the professionals that have continuity, which has to be kind of a really serious criterion for recruitment, right? You don't want people flying in and out. You want people that have institutional knowledge and build that up.
Correct.
Right?
I
Yeah.
100% agree. And
So
then the
we've
other
got-
thing that I would add that I did not share, I mean, Rob and Sandy talked about it, was the sort of, you can have a 5-member, but essentially have an additional pool of, like, an additional 2 members that you can potentially pull from. So during that recruitment process, if you ever come to a situation where you don't have a full 5 hearing a case, you can just grab sort of 2 reserve members to participate in that process.
There were 2 thoughts when I went listening. Number one is that I don't know how many architects we have on the island, but I know we've got a lot of lawyers. But we bring in a lawyer, you know, who we hire in because, and Max developed an affinity for us. And the second,
I'm going to put you on the
He's still
spot on that.
smiling, I don't know. Yeah.
my second thought was that we got to remember there's an architectural review board that's been functioning for 20 years, and somehow they get the people, they do the job. So I think these are solvable problems. I think we've got to do the research and start working it. And I think we can solve it.
I think recruitment is going to be the key to this. I mean, really a process, and being intentional about.
I think we would want anyone we interview to understand the comprehensive plan, what the goals are on Kiowa, because the reason we're doing this is there have been problems with inconsistency of design with nature principles being applied one way for residential and a different way for commercial and multifamily. And that's what the impetus for this is, and we want to be sure that whatever board we get is going to uphold the standards and desires of this community as expressed in the comp plan.
The town council will recruit and presumably approve.
Yeah,
in
so
that
that there
regard.
are, it isn't just going to be the other current ARB, which is going to rubber stamp whatever the commercial people want.
There is one strange nuance that we kind of, it was unsolvable, so we decided not to solve it, which was, if you have, it happens to be a resident of the island who is a professional, does that person become compensated or not compensated? But I think you can kick that can down the road.
So this is less legal advice and more just from our neighborhood is very strict about what you can build in there, and it's all about designing with nature. You got to have 35 foot of nature curtain in front of your house and all this stuff. But we have a design review board, and it has a professional architect who is not a resident that gets paid by the hour. We have a professional landscape architect who is not a resident that gets paid by the hour. We have a civil engineer to look at grading, drainage, adverse effects, which I noticed wasn't listed in here, but maybe something you
probably
want to
should be,
consider.
Yeah.
And then we have one like neighborhood resident who has no clue about architecture or anything, but understands the desires of the community and makes sure that the professionals understand that. And it's worked, and that group not only reviews for residential structures in the neighborhood, but when the developer developed our neighborhood, all of the tracks along the main road outside of our neighborhood, he put covenants on those tracks that any commercial development also gets reviewed by the DRB. So we've reviewed gas stations, D.R. Horton's offices, churches, a bunch of multifamily, which has resulted in litigation because the DRB's been strict and stuff like that. But it's worked with the one resident, but I just give you that for what it is. Yeah.
I think more important than the residents, although we need that, as important as the residents is that we have the competencies.
The confidence.
Well, that's the key thing, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the civil engineer is a good add, too.
That's become particularly
Sounds
useful
like
on the
we know who to
commercial
coach.
tracks.
Yeah, do your guys want to work part-time for us, too?
Probably part-time, so, yeah, it's got.
we do-
To your conflict question, that has come up.
I'm sure
Like,
it
I
has.
hired the landscape architect on purpose because
yeah,
they
me
were
too.
on the board, and then shortly thereafter, they fired her, and I brought somebody on new because they thought I got preferential treatment, so.
But we do say similar fields, so I don't know if that covers us.
I
Yeah.
saw that, yeah, similar field. You could say engineering
Could
or
be-
something like that.
Yeah. I guess to Sandy's point about merging the two, how does that, I mean, what's the procedure? I mean, do we even have to do that now, or does it come after this gets approved?
I think after, because the Tree Preservation Board exists, this doesn't. Let's get this approved, and then when we get to recruiting
Gotta know
people, that's
Robert's-
when we can say, yeah, maybe it makes sense to combine them, but I think we
When
do
you-
this first.
Yeah, when you all were talking about this in terms of things like terms and leadership terms and I don't know enough about commercial development, but my hunch is the time frame that this review board would be dealing with something would potentially be longer than residential. So I wondered about continuity. I wondered about leadership continuity. If a year unless your chair and unless like your vice chair is your incoming chair sort of thing. I wondered if there needed to be something that held all this a little.
I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to raise that because we did talk
We did
about
talk-
terms.
yeah, we did
I
talk
think
about
initially the first draft had 2 years or something, and we expanded
Expanded
it. But your point is, I had the same thought about leadership in terms of 1 year,
You're just
it
getting up
just
to
feels like
speed,
you're constantly-
especially if
Yeah.
for some reason you have multiple projects hitting. And if that's one of your paid people who's also practicing, and I don't know,
Yeah,
I wondered
the-
if y'all had thought about that at all.
The terms, we did increase that, so right now in the terms of 4 years, I'm sorry, 3,
4 years.
4 years there
4-year
are
term.
now, and then the leadership terms are 1 year. But I
So-
didn't know if you'd thought about tying that vice chair, so it was like an
So
incoming.
the leadership chair follows state statute where it's every year they would need to elect a chair. I don't know if, Mac, if we can go more restrictive than what state statute allows in,
but not less restrictive. You're
It would
arguing
be
for
less restrictive,
Yeah.
or
As
can
long as
you,
it's consistent with the statute, we could probably make it.
could you even tie them, meaning that if you were
the
the
statute
vice
says
chair
it shall
1
be for
year?
1 year, so that's what this language comes
Yeah,
from.
But if you
Successive
were the
terms
vice
as a
chair,
lead.
could that mean that you became the chair the following year, so that you had that kind of?
That feels hard to
In-
legislate.
They can be
yeah.
elected
Put it in the
Okay.
rules of
after year
procedure.
after year.
The board is electing.
I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out a way that you don't have massive changes if you've got a project underway,
if you have
but
4-year
perhaps that's not a
terms.
big issue.
Yeah, it's 4-year terms of the board, but I think that's where we landed now that you said that, which was, we have to live within the state statute, but the chair can serve successive terms,
Right.
right?
Not limited by that, yeah.
And maybe at some point, we want to make the first group, have some of them have 6-year terms or something, so you don't have everybody turning over at the same,
Yeah.
but that's a
you've got it.
detail
And
down
then,
the
and then
road.
I do wonder if you want to have something that your chair couldn't be in the final year of their term.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
I think there's a lot to this that will create a lot of interest from town council and their role
get it
in
back.
deciding
Yeah,
some of these.
we'll get it back.
And so
We'll get it back.
will
We'll get
be-
it back.
It will be interesting.
I'm asking you, that's why I'm asking you guys these questions now.
It will be interesting to see what their input is.
Well, shall we send it to them?
Sure. I think we should, and then just see what they.
Okay, we have a motion on, we have a
Because we're-
motion on
well,
the
we're
floor
guessing.
that's
No,
been
I agree with
seconded
you.
to approve 12-24.2. There's no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, they're going to love us.
Thank you, Sandy and
Thank
Rob.
you, Sandy and Rob.
That's just one,
Don.
I
and
think it's a.
we
a
still would
great
need to do
start.
12-130. So I'll have your motion, the architectural review standards
Oh,
section.
sorry, forgot that, my
Isn't
bad.
it not included in it?
Can we move 12-130 architectural design standards for approval?
And what I would recommend here is you guys, based on this conversation that we just had regarding the actual sort of living document of this, just make a recommendation of next steps for that as part of the approval or approved recommendation for the actual ordinance itself.
Okay, so first, let's move it to the floor.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so in discussion, we were going to vote on 12-130 design review standards with the understanding this is a framework that is going to be filled out as the board forms. Yes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you, John, for keeping us in line. Okay, next, new business.
Under
Zoning
new
text
business, we have AZO 25-000012. These are prepared minimum parking standards modification to section 12-128, our access parking loading regulations. These introduce parking minimums specifically in kind of two categories, residential and hotels. But what it does is connect our residential units to a specific sort of bedroom allocation. In addition, sort of clarify some existing language in the code regarding hotels and associated required parking spaces. You'll see on really the substantive changes occur on page 3 of 6. The first page 1 of 6 just includes sort of expanding the scope to ensure the purpose and intent is clear. And then under subsection 1C, it stated previously the town, just to clarify that planning director approval shall be required. And then on page 3 of 6, I think we'll have some discussion. What's being introduced under the multifamily section, previously it's 1.5 spaces per efficiency or 1 bedroom per dwelling unit, which you'll see now is an associated parking minimum required based on the number of bedrooms. And so for 1 bedroom, 2 spaces per 1 bedroom, 2 spaces, for 2 bedrooms, 2 spaces per unit, in addition to 0.25 guest spaces per unit. And then similarly for 3 bedroom or more, 2.5 spaces per unit requirement, plus the addition of 0.25 guest spaces. And so for the 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom or more uses, those are adding in a guest parking requirement. This is a value add or a new sort of clarity or adding a specific guest requirement that would increase parking for residential developments, which we know that that's a desire and a need. The additional changes here to this particular section are for the guest rooms under hotels. And I want to clarify, first thing is that under hotels, you'll see an aggregate of different uses. So this is ensuring that all of those uses under that section, those parking required spaces reflect a hotel. So guest rooms, 1.5 spaces per guest room. And then in addition, you look at the conference area associated uses and employee count. Under the conference area, that's 1 space per 3 persons allowed, and that's being changed from the 1 per 4 spaces, 1 per 4 persons allowed under the maximum occupancy. And this is for any sort of gathering space, think public meeting, assembly, banquet rooms. And then clarifying that under the associated uses, the 50% parking requirement for other uses are restaurants, bars that are associated within that same facility. And then there's a 1 space per employee on the largest shift that's being added to that section as well. Those are the substantive changes. There's one clarification on page 4 of 6 under the footnote 2 regarding that parking spaces requirements may be satisfied, garage or covered. This already kind of naturally occurs where most of parking is already covered spaces are under garage. It just adds that clarity under this section. I'd send a comment back saying we can take it out, but I mean, it's just adding a little bit clarity there.
Yeah, and just so people know, I'm Larry, you may remember in some of our subcommittee discussions over a year ago. Oh. Well, this came up because it made no sense that multifamily didn't have any specific requirements for greater than 1 bedroom. It was just never in there, and we had talked about adding it, and it just never got legs. Now it has legs.
What, I'm trying to understand, on the multiple family, spaces per bedroom type and is required for associated uses. What are we talking about there?
So if there is a residential multifamily, think the Timbers. Timbers has an associated office building, an associated pool and deck. So that's just saying that the required spaces for residential plus whatever those other associated uses that you would need to fold in.
Okay. One of the things that I struggle with parking, it goes back to this concept of bedrooms. And I find, I've spent some time online looking at the Timbers and the Ocean Pines, and, you know, you look at a floor plan, and you say, wow, it's a 2-bedroom, 4-bath. 2-bedroom, 4-bath. And then you realize, well, it's 2 bedrooms and a den, and the den just happens to have a full bath, you know, or there's one in here that they called it a dining room, and you basically look at it and the closet's all set up for the bedroom. And so how do we, when we're looking at a project, how do we assess how many real bedrooms are we talking about? There's one for sale on the website right now at the, which one was that? Oh, it was this one here at the resale at the Cape, and the advertisement for sale says it's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath. If you pull up the floor plan actually on the website with the advertisement, the floor plan says it's 2 bedrooms and a den. But across the hall from the den is a 3rd full bathroom. It's not a half bath. So basically, this is a 3-bedroom unit.
So 2 things on that. One is our building department, and there is an official definition of what constitutes a bedroom. And so during review, what's being permitted is the number of bedrooms based on that definition. So if someone has a den and they have, we're not counting bathrooms as an indicator for a number of bedrooms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that actually was what my thought should be. We almost ought to think about how many full bathrooms there are, because that tells me more about how many bedrooms.
Yeah, and I think one of the rules for bedrooms in some of those dens, a bedroom, I think, has to have a window.
Has a window, closet as well. So those are like specific building requirements for constituting what a bedroom is.
But for rental purposes and really for occupancy purposes, does that
So
have any,
that-
any meaning?
And that's where the parking should
That's where my
reflect.
second point was going to be. So if you guys do identify those types of things, we have our short-term rental compliance officer who goes in as part of their role is going in and find those who are advertising differently than what is actually listed by what's been permitted and inspected. And so that's a whole process. We've brought violations of 4 people who have done that, of advertising differently what they're renting versus what actually is permitted by our ordinance.
Well, I'm less concerned about the person who's reselling it than the initial sale when you know. I mean, I'm talking about parking requirements. That's my main thing. I'm not concerned about the rental aspect of it.
But
you
the
know,
rentals are where the parking becomes problematic. It's
Exactly.
not very often the homeowner who's gonna, I mean, they could fill it up. I mean,
Well, you know, this.
I've pulled out air mattresses.
I mean, the one here, this one in Ocean Pines it's a 2-bedroom, 3.5 bath. So on the first floor, there's 2 bedrooms and 2.5 baths, but it has a loft. And the diagram shows what looks like 2 sofas facing each other in the loft. But it also has a full bathroom right next to it with a closet. And you know that that's going to be a bedroom.
So how do we, you know, and so the point is, for parking requirements, how do we cover that? Because that's a good point.
Right now, the formula is based on bedrooms. So if you guys don't want to use bedroom as the formula and do something totally different, that would be something that would need to be
I
evaluated.
mean, like septic does it on bathrooms, not bedrooms, for example.
Yeah, but for the parking typically associated with a bedroom, because you can naturally kind of account a 2-person per bedroom, and that's what most municipalities use as far as a formula, as you're counting the number of people based on sleeping quarters.
Yeah. Are there any other regulations that define max occupancy based on any criteria, whether it's square footage, whether it's number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, or anything like that? Because we're really trying to get at what is the likely occupancy of the house,
Yeah.
kind of by units.
I think if you were concerned, you've got to probably do, because of age of construction, where there were fewer bathrooms and more bedrooms.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd probably have to do the more restrictive of this number of bedrooms or this number of bathrooms.
So I would just recommend then
Yeah.
increasing it a factor above what the actual bedroom
Yeah.
count is.
The only qualifier I'd put out there, because I was thinking about this relative to the hotels, but it certainly applies. I mean, we're trying to minimize surface coverage. So every time we require another parking space, unless we want to move towards more parking garages, we're covering more of the island. So we're kind of coming, I mean, I hear you, and at some point this becomes an enforcement issue too, and how is that gonna be enforced?
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
By saying we need to cover more with the parking space, you still have your lot coverage total, so you have to have a smaller building.
Oh, I don't disagree, but I think we just,
It may end up being that bedrooms is not perfect, but it's the least imperfect of different measures. I don't know.
Or maybe we add 2 bedrooms, you know, or the 2 bedroom is 2 spaces, but maybe we do 3 bedrooms and add, or 2 bedrooms with 3 or more full baths in that third category. Would that might cover it?
Well, yeah.
it would be
it's-
2 bedrooms or 3 or,
Two-
I think a 2-bedroom, you've almost got to treat like a 3-bedroom based on what you're seeing there.
Well, no, if you have 1 bedroom, 2 spaces, 2 bedroom, 2 spaces, 3 plus bedrooms, 2.5, but under 3.3 plus bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, comma, or 2+ bedroom units with a minimum of 3, with at least 3 full baths. So the 2-bedroom
I
units
just wanna
with 3 full
I just wanna
baths would come under
understand,
the 3-bedroom unit count.
I want to better understand the connection of linking the parking space to the bathroom. That's what I wanted to.
Well, it's showing that what John's point, the 2+ bedroom units are really, for occupancy purposes, 3-bedroom units, which is why they put the 3rd full bath in there. So we want to just make sure that if a regular 2-bedroom unit is 2 spaces,
And I mean,
that's fine.
so I would then recommend,
Yes, 2 spaces plus 2.5, so there already is a factor in there.
Let me throw this out. I mean, you're right now we're planning for like the biggest holiday of the year, like a mall does. The malls plan for their parking around Thanksgiving rush for Christmas. 99% of the rest of the year, those lots are completely, or mostly empty. I say now they are. Malls don't exist anymore. But I mean, we went through it all the time. We had struggled to do these site plans for a mega mall, and they were literally stuck on the whole idea of that for that, Black Friday. This lot will be full, and it was. But that was, that was the only day out of the 365 days that those parking lots are full. So you have, to Mary Beth's point, an asphalt jungle just sitting there.
Well,
And the point is that we're saying all these units are going to, do what is sort of implied by the 3 bedrooms and 3 baths, or 2 bedrooms and 3 baths. I mean, a lot of people, they have just, they have a 2-bedroom and it's a 2-bedroom, and that's it. They don't try to use a 3rd bedroom or a 4th bedroom. They're just using it for.
So I know that when there's not enough, I mean, I know, like, I think I understand what we're trying to accomplish, but what are we trying, I mean, we want to have ample parking, but other than the one very new project that we still have a massive have we had big parking issues and I'm just not aware of them?
I mean, the big one that comes to mind, which is probably the one you're referencing, is the
Yes.
Cape,
Yeah,
where
for
they
sure.
have all these employees and
Yeah.
residents that don't have spaces, and then.
Somehow, there's no place to
But
park.
I mean, that's what this is designed to do, is to prevent a developer from utilizing the whole site, maximizing density, and not taking into account for
Right.
planning purposes
Well, and
parking. Because I was on the same page with you when you were saying, look, we're trying not to cover as much,
Yeah.
have as much impervious surface, et cetera. But I do think like maximum lot coverage and those sort of things all take that into account, such that this will likely result in more parking spaces, but also probably less density.
Well,
as a
and
result.
that's exactly what Joanne said was exactly my thought, was that if you have to have more parking spaces because you have more bedrooms, then you just do away with some units.
Well, he has a factor in here, though. So for a 2-bedroom, it's 2 spaces plus 0.25 guests.
correct.
And, theoretically, to your point, that's going to load level
load
over,
level, yeah,
over whatever
a
the
90
property.
unit,
So-
90-unit building or
And for
whatever.
3 plus, it's 2.5 plus 0.25 guest spaces per unit. So, are we not happy with those kind of ratios? Do we want to increase those
But
ratios?
if we aren't happy, maybe the way you do it as opposed to going to bathrooms is you goose that 0.25 up at 2 bedrooms, because it's the 2 bedrooms that is that where most of the cheating is happening? Is it generally the
It's in
2
the two,
bedroom?
but even in the 3.
Is it in
I
the
don't know. I
threes as well?
rented 2 bedrooms all the time. Like for my family, we had 1 car.
Oh, yeah, for
so
sure.
I
There's
don't
lots
know.
of that.
This feels like a little bit to me of overreach. I understand what we're trying to do, but even the 3 plus bedrooms, if we wanted to maybe juice that up, 2.5 plus 0.5 or point something else.
I don't think
but
there are a whole lot of 3-bedroom units.
you have to look at the whole of the property.
The whole
You know,
building.
not, and I don't know that we want to plan for the equivalent of 4th of July.
Yeah, maybe.
Kind of occupancy. I don't know.
The other thing that I would because the conversation of these would apply to any for multifamily 2-bedroom units. The areas where this might be impacted would all potentially become non-conforming, and so adding in new parking spaces, if if there are changes to that, to existing sites, would be a complication in addition. So I do agree if there is a desire that there's some concern with the formula, that you just increase maybe the additional guest spaces to accommodate what I think is still the fair, appropriate approach from staff's recommendation of going by bedroom. So there's a guest or a per unit count that we're trying to factor for. Is 0.25 the right number? That's kind of what I'm getting to. And so what I shared with Madam Chair is what I would encourage you guys to kind of maybe do is just think, if we have a proposed 20 unit, and just test the formula, and I mean, and see how that
To that point,
applies.
is this like an industry standard formula, or is this?
So
sort
this
of
is a little bit higher than industry standard. A lot of, transparently, a lot of municipalities are moving away from minimum parking standards, particularly in urban settings. More shared use type parking agreements, so that when during the day it's for one use, during the evening it's for another use. I can see that happening in more of our.
And, yeah, and to that point, the hotel parking, would that, I mean, could the sanctuary have happened on the footprint it has now with these guidelines?
I did not do that test.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious,
but-
because I don't find that there's, at Easter, maybe there's a huge issue with parking at the sanctuary, but there isn't regularly,
The
is
common
there?
thing that we deal with now with the common thing that we deal with the resort now, and I think it's more due to their operations, they'll shift their operations patterns. So employees might be here concentrated at parking areas, and then they're busing them to a different location, just depending on activities and whatnot of what's going on time of year. And so it's hard to kind of police that factor of it.
I had a different question, which was going back to the Cape, with the club there. Where does the club kind of fall into these categories? You have restaurant, you have pool, but what would be the prevailing requirement if you're going to put the club in there for parking? Is that clear?
So yeah, so under that was, I think, to Mr. Connolly's points, other uses. So they would need to factor in, if you have a restaurant associated with, you have office associated, pool and deck, you would have to account based on those specific square footages.
I think it's good, adding in the guest space requirement is new, and that was a good add, John. I think that will address some of the problems, because we just don't want what happened with the Cape, where they built it with no club parking. So we want to be very specific that you're building something, you got to have parking for it. And I think you did a good job on the employees too, that you have to have a parking space for your biggest shift.
But to your point, when you talk about that associated usage, 50% of parking, that would have covered it with that requirement. If in the Cape, the associated usage, they would have had it then, restaurants, bars, they would have increased it because there wasn't that requirement when they built the Cape.
There was a requirement to have parking on site.
I know,
and they just
but not
didn't
50.
do it.
Yeah, but they specifically said restaurants, bars. So I think they're giving the requirement that you have to anticipate that.
So just under hotels, John, does this in general, I don't know if you guys did any kind of test, does this generally keep the total parking spaces the way they are now?
This would increase
It would
slightly,
increase
just
slightly?
because of the change from 1 per 4 to 1.3 per maximum occupancy. So it would naturally increase.
Bless you.
Yeah, and by including employee, because I know there've been problems at West Beach with the West Beach Conference Center when there are things and employees there is real parking problems. And they overflow into the neighborhoods, and we're trying to prevent that from happening. Any other questions on this? Concerns, additions, deletions?
But where are we? Let me tell you.
Well, I guess, what I'm hearing, I agree with I do agree with John on the two-bedroom plus den thing. It's kind of sneaky the way they do that and make it three-bedroom, but I think Sandy's point, too, is that, is this going to be a real problem, especially if we have the .25 guest spaces per unit? I can
I
live
was
with
happy to
this.
see the .25, I just didn't know if it should be .50.
Good, you know.
But that's an industry standard. You said it's above the industry standard? Is that what you
This
said?
is, the .25 is probably consistent from what I noticed around the area locally, South Carolina. I think there are some that do less, and then some use actually just a minimum factor. So every 10, that's just hypothetically, every 10 units, you need 5 guest spaces, or every 20 units, you need 5 minimum spaces. I thought the percentage would narrow it based on, like I said, the bedroom, because what I've realized on Kia was the designing and the marketing is they drive the design of the building based on the demand for bedroom type. So whether it's a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, the market is more so dictating where the developer would go on those matters.
I don't know. Pick a
Are
number.
we comfortable with
Well,
the
I don't know, I just wanted to point out that this is what they're doing. And the thing that struck me about it was, at the end of Duneside Road, you have the Duneside townhomes. And the Duneside 2 townhomes are the very last, they're right before you get to Timbers. And there's 24 Duneside townhomes, and it's split between 18 and 6. But the parking lot for the last 6, for the first time since I've been here in 20 plus years, they now have signs like they do at Chipwatch, parking for Duneside 2 people only. And so obviously they're starting to have a problem, and I don't know what it's from. I don't know, it's because there's a boardwalk there, people are parking there. But you know, once Ocean Pines goes in, well, they have guests, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that guy can park over there. But it's the first time in all these years, there's ever been signs there telling people this is for Duneside 2 residents.
If you guys are aware, part of our comprehensive plan sort of discussions is thinking about more broadly how we solve some of these issues. So, I mean, this is a more tactical kind of, what I would say, one by one, but broadly, we should be still thinking about how we solve for vehicles and parking overall on the island as well.
For Ocean Pines, how have they been approved for parking? Because one of the issues was there was nothing, there was 1.5, period, for, it never specified any more for 2 or 3-bedroom. How many parking spaces are, I don't recall reading that.
So the Ocean Pines, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that was part of our, folded in with the mediation.
That was a
of
negotiated,
with
that was a
that number.
negotiated settlement
But the
number. I
parking,
can tell you the
but
number.
some of the parking spaces
Not a
were
standard.
for
56, I think, on the site, or 50.
How many, I mean, there's the Cape parking on Ocean Pines, but how many parking spaces are allocated for the Ocean Pines units?
We can get that, I can get that number to you.
Because it'd be curious to see whether, because that's one of the reasons we need to do this.
Okay, so where are we?
So, okay, are we comfortable with the .25 for guest spaces? Do we want to approve this, send it to town council?
I'm comfortable with the .25,
Okay.
with
gonna
no
level.
professional background whatsoever,
It's gonna be
other
level.
than
It's gonna level itself out.
logically it makes sense to me.
Okay, so have we had a motion? No, I've lost track now, sorry. We moved this, we're discussing it. We're ready to approve it.
I think we need.
Okay. All in favor of approving 12-128 access parking and loading regulation changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So my apologies, I didn't print that out in your book, so that's the last agenda item on doing your business.
Okay,
I didn't scroll down from
yeah, I got that.
Read it.
John.
More work to do.
One more.
So our last agenda item under new business is AZO 25-000013. This is a modification to 3 of our zoning sections regarding our boards and commissions. 12-23 Planning Commission, 12-24 Board of Zoning Appeals, 12-24.1 Landscape and Tree Preservation Board. It's just clarifying the composition of those various boards. the origin of this came through actually the Board of Zoning Appeals, where there was an inconsistency between the rules of procedure and our zoning code. And so what this does is attempt to kind of clarify the intent that you can have property owners and resident members as part of the board. You see under 12-23, what we're doing is just clarifying that a resident member means someone who resides within the town municipal boundaries, not just on Kiowa. That's a nomenclature thing, but just officially clarifying that a resident means within the town of Kiowa. Under the 12-24 Board of Zoning Appeals, the composition still stays the same, but the member residents being clarified that that's 5. And then similarly, as previously noted in the previous section, within the town of Kiowa Island municipal boundaries. Under the 12-24.1 Landscape and Tree Preservation Board, this may not necessarily be necessary, but I think the direction that we were heading regarding the Landscape and Tree Preservation Board and the conversations we've had now with the Design Review Board is that we were leaning towards having more, or at least an interest of having participants on those boards outside of resident and property owners. So this just kind of reiterates that. I think there's still a desire to have residential members on the board, but currently we've had a vacancy now on our tree preservation board, even though we haven't had any activity, but we just had a vacancy for quite some time and want to be able to recruit a full constituted board. Are there any questions there?
Are inconsistent with these ordinance changes we're going to tweak.
Yes.
Coming next.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to approve AZ 025-000013?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Awesome. Okay, John, correspondence, staff comments?
Yes, I just want to first begin with a highlight from yesterday's town council meeting. One being 3 items that were on the agenda. Our ordinance 2025-16, which is a communication tower, cell towers, that received second and final reading. There is anticipated additional sort of changes based on town council's approval, but that did receive its second and final reading. One of the changes, or a few of the changes that acknowledged, I encourage you to kind of maybe go back and listen if you didn't tune into yesterday's meeting. Town council really had a discussion regarding that item. The incorporating a maintenance clause regarding upkeep and sort of the aesthetic of the towers over time. And so that's something that we'll be bringing back for you guys to make recommendation on. What was actually changed are sort of minor things regarding the structure organization of the ordinance. Their waiver requirement was also considered, and there was one other thing that I'm losing a blank on right now that was changed. But that was the waiver, drop and swap.
fall zone?
A lot of discussion on that.
Fall zone.
Yeah.
Discussion went on forever.
It will come back to me before we leave this afternoon. The second item, our comprehensive plan, Kiowa Next. I just want to say on the record, thank you all for your contribution to that particular plan. Town council really marveled and acknowledged your hard work in that effort. And so it has received first reading. There'll still be some tweaks as noted, as you all are aware, to get it to second reading. But thank you again, and continue to move that forward through the approval process.
John, can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
One of the points that was made with a couple of times was to update some of the numbers on the probable versus the possible and all that stuff. I know that you were a proponent of that early on. Is that something that we do need to move on, or we will move on?
I think,
Yeah, I talked to Mark Vermar about
Okay.
I think we have the numbers. It was just, I think, how do we communicate that to the community and show, I think what we, in the current plan, what I think it alludes to is giving the community confidence that this is probably a ceiling. And I think it just, not giving the understanding that we'll ever reach that ceiling is probably what's missing from the plan. And I think, how do we kind of communicate that possible?
Yeah, Mark Vermar brought up the point that if you have the maximum hotel rooms, you can't have the maximum of everything.
I think there was a statement buried in there somewhere.
We put
Yeah.
a statement in there regarding trade-offs,
Yeah.
but I think showing what that
Wanted to
number is,
clarify it a little.
but it's really
I don't know if
difficult.
it changes any real actions or,
That's the point, because number one, it's difficult to put a number in there if we don't have any more information from the resort and what they actually want to kind of get to that
Okay.
refined number. But, and then the other item was our base zoning districts that also received first reading. If you all recall, modifications to the base zoning districts, lot coverage standards, building heights, and setbacks on the ocean for RST1, RST2. That received a 4-1, one abstention from town council. So things are moving forward. That's all of the updates there. I do want to give a note that regarding, I mentioned this at our last meeting, I did have one brief follow-up with the county and Seabrook. We're trying to align schedules to have a second follow-up regarding the urban growth boundary. The discussions now are for us to be able to enter into an intergovernmental agreement to where we identify some parameters, some scope to align on standards that would be applied to Betsy Carrison Parkway. And so the goals is that this would reinforce the urban growth boundary and allow all municipalities to be on the same page before any changes to that urban growth boundary occur. In addition to adding some potential buffer requirements on Betsy Carrison. So that's good news there. Daniel, Patria, am I missing anything else? Seafields, and the mayor gave an update yesterday on Seafields, but Seafields and MUSC and Night Heron Park, they're all moving pretty consistently and with goals of end of this year to be wrapping up those projects. The Seafields project itself, they've added a retaining wall or design phase of trying to get a retaining wall to address some of the runoff that was occurring on that site into Seabrook Island Road. So that's one of the things that, from a change standpoint, that's being worked on. No new developments per se regarding any new developments, if that was the question regarding any new projects. Still pending on engagement with the resort on any activities of their two sites. Other questions?
Yeah, I guess the only question, you sent over I think there were two or three comments that came on the comprehensive plan, mostly positive, and were there any critical comments that, or are you keeping them from us?
I did not keep them from you. I gave you guys kudos saying that it was well received. I think the most critical came from what was acknowledged at town council yesterday in Mark's comments from a critical standpoint, just really evaluating that possible probable number to give the community more reflective of where we actually may be. But generally, well-received document from the community.
The other one that caught my eye was the one about growth. That, that we probably don't work. I think they missed the point that it was A, balanced, and B, the point about specifically, managing density. So we were probably more aligned to that point than either came across or the person thoroughly read.
Maybe just read the whole thing.
Well, if your standard is zero growth, any growth is going to be bad.
Any other updates for us, John?
That's all.
Again, no public, so no public comments again. Commissioner comments, Rob?
Good, thanks.
Just thanks to Rob and Sandy for the work that they did. That was a lot.
We're becoming a self-congratulatory body.
Yes, I congratulate you all. I love that you're all working. Everybody's contributing, and
Part of the
it's been
team.
great. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?